Every room in this house that has a flat surface has something on it. And all the things on all the windows and all the surfaces have memories. So I've picked some of the memories. Otherwise, this will go on for about 1,000 stories in about 2 weeks of time. So we'll start with where I was born, but it won't be too long. Anyway, I was born in Bogue, Kansas, in a town of 100 people. I was an only child. There weren't very many children. There were only about 7 children in the whole town. And there was 100 people only on Saturday when the farmers came in. And I had never heard of New York. Maybe in one test I had to take, I'd never heard of any of the countries. That I ended up going to 16 different countries. And I knew of none of the people in the arts. I'd never heard of any of it and didn't know what was going on. I had no goals, no idea, which has gone through my whole life. Everything I've done, somebody got the idea, somebody pushed me, and I did it. It's never been my idea all the way through. So, starting back at Bogue, the first part is the grocery store. We had one, and then the post office, and then the barber shop, which is not well done, but it's the white thing. And my father was a barber, and we lived in the back of the barber shop. We didn't have any school plays. I'd never seen a play. I guess our entertainment was I'd hide behind a big barrel stove and listen to my dad. He was a wonderful storyteller. And as as my mother said, he put the solution on their face and then put the towels on, and they were stuck there, and then he'd start to tell them stories. So I would hide until I got found, and then of course I was sent away. They probably weren't really kids' stories that I would listen to, but I loved to watch him. And then we were written up as the smallest town to have a printing press, and I'd go down and watch, and they'd give me all the color paper to do artwork on, which was an enormous thing. And my mother always made me change my clothes, and I have no idea why. Everybody in town had already seen me many times. But anyway, I had to change my clothes to go next door. And then we all stood by our box, and we said nothing. And all looked down. And then as soon as Mrs. Thompson, she had wonderful hands, and she pushed the little wooden thing across, and she said, "The mail is sorted." And then we all go, "Oh, I wonder if we got any." And then we got hold, and we were all so excited. And the newspaper came wrapped in white paper, and that was the big thing. I was told to wait till the end, and they let me have all the paper for artwork, which must have been quite amazing. But probably the biggest thing of entertainment was once a year was the Nicodemus, which is just a few miles away. It's been written up in the New York Times. It's the Underground Railroad. When the slaves got there, they were free. And once a year they had the reunion. Well, in Bogue would come pink and yellow, pink, yellow, different color 50s cars, and it'd be filled with black folks just laughing and all wearing hats and a California tag, things we had never seen before. It was so exciting. And then we got to go to the fair, and it was all black. No whites were allowed to stay overnight. And I don't know how it happened, but when I was very young, my folks had to stand there. And so at 2, I was told I could yodel. All the things I could do when I was little, I can't do any of them now. But anyway, so I was left with a Schweitzer stand to yodel to get people in. And then as I grew older, it was so exciting because I'd sneak off, and they had little colored lights around the music. And the music was wonderful, and all those people dancing, and also going to their cars for illegal booze. And I would sneak around with all the cars and watch them. It was just magic. The whole thing was wonderful. Every Memorial Day, we went and we cut branches, 3 branches for each graveyard, and made crepe paper roses and tied those in. And it was a long process, and I loved it. I just loved it. And then we put on the ancestors who came from Denmark, and they had homesteaded the land. And the tree that we took was the one tree that was left from when they planted it. So that was an enormous thing in my life. When we went back with the girls, which was many years later, many years later, they were still having it. But now there's only 17 people that live in town. And they were getting the church ready for it and cleaning up the buildings. And the cars were coming. And instead of a whole dance floor, they just had one piano with the colored lights. And 3 women sang. And it went across the prairie. And my daughters just cried. It was so, so beautiful. And we asked Mrs. Schweitzer if she wouldn't come into Bogue and have something with us, and she said no. She looked like Aunt Jemima. She had a great big chest and her hair all wrapped up. And anyway, she said no, and then finally she gave in, and she said, but she had to go in the back door. She said, and I'll just have sody pop, that's all. And she loved the twins, and she held them. They didn't want to go on the rest of the trip. They wanted to stay with her because it was so, so wonderful. I guess the first time I was on stage outside of that yodeling business was when I was in 4th grade. Some powerful, really personality woman came through town. I don't know any of the details, except she was training people for a political rally. And somehow or other, I don't know, I got chosen as a banker's son, and we were taught a song and dance. Well, they wanted to try it out at the PTA, which was always held in the high school gym. And of course the stage was on the side. And everybody in Bogue, all 100 people, went to PTA because there wasn't much going on. The night came, and my mother, I remember, was backstage, and we had rented a room to a woman. This was Depression days, so we're really poor. And we rented a room for a beauty shop at the front. And she came backstage for some reason. Anyway, I refused to go on. The piano started, and I wouldn't go on. And my mother said several things to me nice, and I still wouldn't move, I'm told. And I was promised a Shirley Temple permanent because I wanted one so bad. And playing in the attic, I always wanted to be Shirley Temple. But there was a little cute blonde girl that got to be her every single day. She offered to give me a perm, and I wanted to be the first one in town to have one. But I still didn't go out, and I'm told finally my mother just pushed me. And I went out, stood dead still for a long time, and the pianist and nobody knew if I was going to do anything, and then I finally began. So that was the beginning of my great thing on stage, of the whole thing with the PTA. I was in Bogue until I was a senior. My whole life was Bogue until I was a senior in high school, and my mother didn't want me to marry Calvin Baumgardner, who ended up in prison, and she didn't want me on a tractor out in the field, so somehow or other she managed to move us to Salina, Kansas. 3 weeks after it started, I was talked into going to Marymount College, which was the only college there, and it's all-girls college. I was the only non-Catholic, so I got to do everything that they didn't. We had to be ladies and sit with our knees crossed and the whole thing. So anyway, I majored in business, and of all things, and this continued until I did some kind of a show at the USO. I can't even imagine how I did it or what it was like. But anyway, they wanted me to try it out at Marymount, and so I did it. And the nuns were all sitting in the balcony, and they decided I had talent. They decided that I would go to New York. They knew nothing about New York whatsoever. And so I became the first drama major. In between there, somehow or other, they sent me off to Catholic University of America to study with Walter Kerr, to learn directing. In fact, I went there and learned everything, then came back and used it and did everything at the theater. And Jean Kerr, his wife, was writing Our Hearts Were Young and Gay, and she was rewriting it constantly. And I ended up getting to go costume with her. And it was just wonderful because she was reliving the whole thing. And that was my first idea of costuming. Oh, I forgot to tell you, at Marymount I took sewing and I flunked it because I couldn't follow those patterns, or wouldn't. I couldn't put those dots together. And I just sat and put the pins in and made designs. And I remember Sister Angelica sitting over me, and she said, if you ever get interested in clothes, you'll probably be very good. She was just furious with me. Except my father, who had been very ill, he died the night before my big recital of 2 hours long doing everything, and we had no money and lots of bills. So I taught high school typing, bookkeeping, and shorthand for 3 years, and started plays. None of them had ever done any plays. And so I started plays, and probably the most interesting thing was I did Our Town, and I got a letter from a woman who lived out in the country. She was very poor. It was a wonderful letter, and I wish I still had it. She said, please don't do Our Town, because she was in school with Thornton Wilder, and that was her theme, and he took all of her family and wrote the play from it, and she should have gotten credit for it and some of the money. And she begged me not to open, but the principal was scared to death. He thought the school would be burned down or something. But anyway, we did open, and he came, but that was a really interesting thing because he was always off. This is a little souvenir from my days of doing fashion shows. And the first one I did at the Union, and George Bolin built a wonderful set for us to do. And I had maybe 100 different students that were something I couldn't do today at all. Anyway, they were the models, and we got live music, and we were in the middle of it. We were doing fur coats at the moment, and we were in the middle of it, and the musicians get big sigh. They went, ugh. And I said, what is the matter? And they said, we haven't had any music for 5 minutes. What do you want? And I was so annoyed with them, I just said, corduroy. And so if I told them what piece I wanted, that's what they would have played. But they created the best music in the whole world for it. Hitchhiking around Europe, we met all the top artists. One of them was William Scott, who was very well known. He painted a painting, one of his paintings, which is typical, on linen cloth, and for me to make a dress out of. And it was pinned on me. And I made it to wear to a Gampo Feast grand opening, one of the big galleries in London. And he came to it, and when he walked in, he was so pleased, and he said, it was wonderful. He said, that's the best my painting has ever been hung, you know. A great deal of these were gifts from alum that I'd visited all around the world. And some I chose. This one is from China, and it had a little handle that broke off, and I can't show it to you, but it has a tiny little spoon, and I suspect it was from marijuana. I'm not sure. And this is a calendar from Bali. This was from Turkey. A man they had beads in them, and a man was with a group playing music, and he was stomping on it, and the beads would rattle. And so he wanted me to join in, and I was too bashful when he made me join in. And then he took it off and took the beads out and gave me the necklace. This is probably my most important thing. It's all the animals that I've collected through the years, and I can meet anybody I want to if I have this on. I've had babies chew on it. A lot of the paint has gone off. Some of the heads are chewed off. I've met people in airports that are crossing, and they say, I like your necklace, and I know I'm going to meet it again. And I've gone to all kinds of events, and this necklace can get me through anything. Found, brought, made for me, given to me from all over the place, and they're my security. I have to hide behind all my jewelry so people look at it instead of me, which is part of that doll. I found this in a real dirty box on a shelf in Egypt, and I was on a tour, and the tour guide said, well, you'll pay too much for it, leave, I'll get it for you. So he got it down to almost nothing, and bought it for me. And then I had it, and the tour guide saw it, and she said, that's illegal. She said, that belongs to the royal family, and this is their insignia that they use when they, like in England, they put wax on all the packages and they stamp it. So I had to hide it to get it out of the country. And probably this is the most wonderful, because a fourth grader that I had 60 years ago applied for me to get the National Sondheim Award, which I had not even heard of, and I got it. And so we went to New York, and she bought this ring for me, And when I taught her in the 4th grade, the day I left, it was a really poor white school. They had nothing. They didn't have shoes. There was one work of art that had a foot and a hookworm in it. And so I didn't even have any college hours in teaching at all for any of these things. And so she came and she helped me, and I said the other teachers are going to have to teach them what they're supposed to know, because I don't know anything like that. Like she said, you couldn't work the gym materials, so you taught us to dance. And I got cars and took them to art galleries, and we did all sorts of things. I didn't get any pay for half a year, and then the governor came and said I should be paid, and so I ended up getting the governor's award. And then 60 years later, she filled out the forms unknown to me, and we keep in contact with each other, of course. And in this particular case, my student, he was staying with this top designer, Estevez, and I decided to stay. I was invited to stay with them at Estevez's place, and Estevez told me to go back and pick whatever fabric I wanted. So I picked all this black fabric, and I made this particular dress because Richard and I were invited to a Sunday evening with Liz Taylor and Richard Burton, just the two of them. Earl Mastel sat next to me, and I had gone to another show where you had to have a tattoo to get in, and my friend had gotten me a little black bowl, which I wore with this dress. And Lauren Bacall came in, and she was standing behind me, and she leaned over and she said, "What the hell is that?" Anyway, Estevez ended up drawing this, and he acted like it was his design, and it got in Women's Wear Daily as his design. Okay, this window is full of more memories than you will ever want to know about. So I'll just take a few. This is from, I've been to 16 countries, and I've seen art museums and theater in all of the companies of some kind. And the Chinese theater was very different and very exciting, which is where I got these dolls. They were from the figures that were actually in the show. And I went to the Venice Biennale, and I got this, and I had gone to Peggy Guggenheim's museum, and the boy that ran it, in those days nobody was wearing blue jeans, so we were the only ones with American students' blue jeans. That's how all this worked. And he found out that I was interested in theater, so he got me 2 tickets to the Venetian Theater. And so I thought I'd be sitting on the back row or just go in the side. And word got out, and they had me the director of the United States Theater, and it gone all overboard. And so I was to meet the director beforehand. He spoke no English, I spoke no Italian, and so it was quite interesting. And I think his wife was complimenting what I was wearing, but I couldn't tell for sure. Anyway, then it came time, and he walked us in the side door, and we walked through very slowly all the way down the theater and sat in the front row. I don't remember a thing about the play. I went to Costa Rica, and this was on a tour, and I went into up all kind of rocky sort of plains, and there were lots of children, and they were climbing all over the rocks, and they were barefoot, and they were beautiful. And they sort of guided me into a very dark cave that was full of smoke, really dark and heavy smell. And in there were their parents who were carving and making these dolls. And so they begged me to buy one, and of course I bought the spinning. So I went back out with the dolls and thought that was the end of us. And then they grabbed me and set me on a rock and said they wanted to say goodbye. And so they sang a song to me. It was like children's theater. It was wonderful. And then this is huge. I went to Europe by accident, no plans. I found a paper in a waste paper basket and filled it out and didn't think I'd ever hear from them, and got a scholarship. And then where to go in Europe. I didn't speak any languages, and so it had to be England. And so where do you go there for? Well, Shakespeare. So we went to Stratford-on-Avon, and in order to get there, because we had no money, So we got on the Orosa Sun, a Greek ship, as entertaining specialists. We had over 100 things going on, and more food than you can ever believe. And this comes from the table of all the food that I've kept all these years. And I took a washcloth, among other things, and I made it into a puppet, and we turned the ping pong tables over, and we gave puppet shows to the little kids. I never thought of doing a children's theater, but I started one, actually it was the first year I was here, and so we had people from many states came in. Minneapolis came down, Rochester came down, and the first two that I gave were Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, and then Alice in Wonderland. And anyway, the Samson was filled to the brim, and I was supposed to not let anybody in the upstairs. And I went upstairs and it was already filled, so I just took a box and threw the programs to them across the whole way. Well, we learned later not to give them programs until after the show, because especially when the parents came, fathers tend to roll the programs, then straighten them out, then roll them. And I could do books on every single school, because I always stood at the top of the steps and I watched the kids and their teachers come in, and I could tell which school was coming in. It was amazing. I wanted to end with Peter Pan, and that was a big battle, but I got to do it. Our audiences were 6,000 and 7,000 kids, and we played for a week, and the shows were an hour long, and it got so, like, Fountain City didn't have any money, so they had to sell. I kept it free, except they had to pay for the bus. Fountain City sold cookies and things so they could come. It was wonderful. What's the school on Mankato? WK. Oh, that principal was wonderful. He had twice as many people. He would put 2 in a seat. He just said to the ushers, I mean, these kids have never been on a campus. They've never seen a play or ushers or anything, you know, and it wasn't like going in the gym. It was totally, and we had the ushers dressed. We had the whole thing really in grand style. And anyway, he walked them to the show from Mankato. And it was raining, and the kids were putting on makeup, and they looked out the window and they said, here comes the school. And he would come to me and he'd just say, now just tell everybody, just take it easy and stand around and I'll do all the seating. And he put 2 in a seat, and I did that for years. And it was just amazing. So, and then I decided to go on the road with Children's Theater of the Mind, which is a group of stories. And we had a company, and we played 3 shows a day, and we went to 3 states. And as the last show was playing, we were getting ready to get in the car to drive to the next thing. And that was a wonderful experience. And my daughters were in all of these. They were in everything until they got to be competition with the college kids. And then they went into tech and that sort of thing. And got the idea for Arlen Turp 2 to do a show, very experimental, and it was always a theme of one word. And we called it Theater of the Mind. And I did those for 20 years. And this particular one is water. And we did the publicity underwater. And I got somebody to paint the side of the swimming pool. I had it all arranged and have the audience around the pool, and then they wouldn't let me do it that way. So we had to put a thing over the stage that dripped water in the theater, so at least we'd have something. But then it got so, it grew so big that then the lobby had all sorts of things going on. Then it got outdoors, and it was just amazing. And we had all different themes. One theme was, we're not in Kansas anymore. I couldn't think of anything else to do. And many times when I walked into the room, I was panicking because I didn't know what it was going to be and hoped the idea would come to me in time. But we had really they were hour long, and we did 2 shows a night. And it was, the first show was in Thompson, and they didn't want me to do it. And I didn't know if anybody'd come because it was so new and different. And there was hardly any publicity, and they wouldn't do a set or lights. So the department of two people, and so the head of the department that had hired me sight unseen, and another wonderful, the set designer. Anyway, so I had to use their set and their lights, and it was just terrible. But we had standing room. I went into the theater, and all down Thompson at the hall there was lined up people, and I thought they were going to class. I couldn't believe they were going in to see. So the people were standing all around, and Dr. Dufresne had to stand. And at the end, they threw things toward us on the stage, toward me, and people were shouting. And at the very end, Dr. Frayne walked up and put a weed in my mouth, and I still have it as another souvenir of that whole thing. Yeah, but it continued. It got bigger and bigger. That's, I think, Theater of the Mind.